In 1994, Julianna Margulies appeared in the pilot of a new medical drama. She appeared as a brain-dead suicide victim, but she was so likable that when the show was picked up by NBC, producers Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg decided to bring her back to life. That show is ER, and her portrayal of Nurse Carol Hathaway has earned her an Emmy and 4 Screen Actors Guild Awards. She has also been busy making the transition to film. Last year, she appeared in Paradise Road and Traveler, and she can now be seen in 2 new films, The Newton Boys and A Price Above Rubies. I am pleased to have her back near her home, New York City. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Let me just go to the childhood thing, which is interesting because I don't know whether you missed something, but it had to be exciting after your parents split.
Right.
Your dad, an advertising executive who did some terrific things like the Alka-Seltzer, I guess.
Right.
And your mom seems like a very different character who takes young daughter and goes off to Paris and London where you live.
Right. Well, now looking back on it, it was a very exciting life. Yeah. And I appreciate it now. As a kid, you don't. You know, as a kid, you feel...
You miss your family.
Well, you want to stay in one place and feel like you fit in. Right. You know, and when you're always the odd man out, you just, it's hard to just adjust to different countries, let alone new schools, you know? Mm-hmm. So now I'm so grateful for it, and it was a great foundation for me.
What did it do for you, you think? What are the pluses of that kind of nomadic life?
Well, as a child, going back and forth from New York to England, just my accent alone, I would be able to switch on and off in whatever country I was to fit in. And I learned at a really young age to sort of adjust to whatever situation I was thrown in. I remember my mom saying, the second time we moved back to England, saying, we can always go home, let's just try and stick it out. Because we weren't in the greatest circumstances. Yeah. We didn't have a terrific house to live in at the time. We were living with these handicapped children, and it was tough on me and my sister. You don't want to invite kids home from school, you know. Yeah. But now I look back on it, and I wouldn't trade it in for the world, because it really allows me, I can adjust to any situation I'm in. And I find it now challenging rather than frightening. And languages come much easier because you learn several of them young. Well, French was my first language, right. And then I wouldn't speak it. I was so angry that then we moved to England, and none of the kids understood me. And my mother would speak to me in French, and I'd speak back in English. You know, you were about, now I'm so angry at myself that I didn't keep it up. When did you get the acting bug? Well, the kind of schools that I went to my whole life, and I'm from a very theatrical family. My mother was a dancer with ABT for years, and my father was a writer. My sisters, I mean, we went to the kinds of schools that were very artistically inclined. So theater was a huge part of my upbringing, and it was always inherent. But my grandmother on my father's side was one of the first women lawyers in New York State. She graduated from NYU in 1924. Wow. And I always felt, she always had this one word, prestigious. Prestigious. Yes, and I remember at about 8 saying, yes. Yeah, what does prestigious mean, Dad? And I always felt that it wasn't prestigious enough, that I had to somehow follow in her footsteps rather than follow in my parents' footsteps. So once I got to college and gave everything else a try, my first night on stage, I really... What was it? It was... magical? It was incredible, and it wasn't even a big part. I was cast in the Boom Boom Room by David Rabe, and I was a freshman cast in this big senior play, and they cast me as Melissa, a go-go dancer. I had maybe 4 lines, and I'll never forget standing in this cage, in my go-go cage, with my leather pants on, and looking out at this audience, and I said, that's it, that I can't go back. Yeah. So what'd you do? So I pretty much majored in theater, and you know, it was great because I went to Sarah Lawrence, so I was right near the mecca of theater, and I was able to take classes here in New York City, and I just pursued acting. The ER break came by accident. Complete fluke. I was in LA visiting my boyfriend at the time. I thought I'd come out and just stay for a month. I had enough cash to stay for a month. And I went on a couple of auditions. I figured it's pilot season, what they call pilot season, which means all the new series are being done. And I went in, and there was I had a really bad attitude to LA casting directors and actors. And it was actually a very humbling... A New York attitude? I had a bad New York attitude. Because I had already been doing theater at Yale, rep here, and tons of regional stuff. All the casting directors in New York City respected my work and knew me. I didn't have to I didn't have to bang down doors, but in L.A. I was just another girl.
Another New York actress looking for a job.
And it was very humbling because I sort of went out there thinking, ugh, yeah, that everyone says LA's full of actors, but wait till, you know. And I'd sit there for 2 hours waiting. I'd get lost to auditions, you know, in these rent-a-cars that couldn't go more than 50 miles an hour. I mean, it was one of the hardest times of my life. And I remember sitting for this audition for this Michael Crichton, Steven Spielberg pilot to go in as a recurring character.
Yeah, go ahead.
And they made us wait 2 hours. And I was getting angrier and angrier. And I missed 2 other auditions because of it. There were so many people in the hallway. And they brought me in, and I read with so much attitude that they said to me...
She's got an egg.
Yeah. They actually said, you know, you're wrong for this part, but there's another part, Hathaway, and we'd like for you to read for her. And I said, I don't do cold readings. I mean, I really had such a terrible attitude. And they laughed, and John Wells knew, you know, he was like, this is a girl from New York, and I get it. And he said, you know what, then take all the time you want and read it and come back when you're ready. So I took a couple hours and I came back and read for Hathaway. And by the time I got home, I had gotten the part, and I said, no, it'll take me out of pilot season, and it's a tiny little guest starring role, and why would I do that?
One time only, and I'm out.
And everyone said, Julianna, it's Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg. You just do it.
Yes.
And
they do other things.
Yeah. So I thought, well, it'll get me, I needed money to get back home. So I thought, well, it'll give me enough money to get home, and then I'll do Homicide. I was doing Tom Fontana's Homicide anyway. So I did it, and then I came home, and apparently I tested well.
Now, did Clooney call you up and say, the story has called you up and said, listen, they want you, and just forget it and do this? Well,
he had an inkling. Clooney's always in on all the behind-the-scenes stuff. I didn't know there was the way a pilot is tested is with a regular audience, and they have a knob that they turn up or down if they like it or not. And apparently when my character died, they
dialed you up. Yeah.
So he left a message saying, word has it, you tested high, don't take any other jobs. Which, thank God he did that, you know, because I would have taken, I was up for this other gig, and I would have taken it.
So then they said, let's make this character a permanent character.
Right, right.
What makes it so popular, you think? What makes this show?
You know, it's such a good question. I kind of want to go out and do a survey myself of the public.
So why do you like this?
Yeah, because for me, this is what I think. I don't know, I could be wrong. I think these are real people. I used to watch, when I was in college, I used to watch Dynasty to escape because it was so hilarious and fantastical, and you could just escape into this
life
fantasy.
of people you didn't know.
Right, and people waking up in the morning with lip gloss on after a night of romping, you know, and thinking, oh, how hilarious. ER, I mean, it's the 90s. It's a different time, and I think ER, the characters are all flawed. They're all real. These are people that make mistakes, and I think the public relate to that. You know, that they like
These
seeing
are people
that
are real, authentic.
Yeah, I mean,
with
that Hathaway
problems and talents
alike. This is a woman who's just struggling through life. You know.
Who was your character?
A woman struggling through life.
Yeah, right. But who is Carol Hathaway?
You know,
other than being a nurse.
She's an interesting person. I think she's an incredibly strong woman, but hasn't fully discovered that yet. She's just starting to discover that, which makes it so fascinating to play her, because I'm constantly unfolding these layers and finding new things out about her. The most challenging thing for an actor. Yeah. And Alec Baldwin once said this, and I was so happy when I read it, because he said the hardest thing for any actor is to play the same character for years and years and years.
Because you risk, what, staleness?
Well, yeah.
Boredom.
I mean, yeah, you got to keep it fresh.
You got upset during the second season, I heard, because your character wasn't evolving, becoming interesting, or was what?
Yeah, I felt they had given me such an incredible first season. I mean, they had so much to come from because of the suicide attempt, you know. So there's nowhere to go but up.
Carol tried to commit suicide.
Yes, in the pilot, exactly. And it was sort of trying to figure out this, you know, how is she changing, how is she growing? Right. And then in the second season, and I understood it because they needed to focus other places, but I found a reactionary character, which meant all the storylines were happening with other people, and I was like a sponge,
so
just
very
taking it in.
Different from the first season.
Yeah, and it wasn't challenging.
And were the writers receptive?
They were unbelievable. They listen, and they understood. John Wells is one of the most brilliant writers I've ever met, and compassionate people.
He's head writer?
He's the head writer. He's pretty much, I think, with Crichton, why ER exists.